The Kentucky Wildcats look completely different heading into 2026. Let's look back at what happened in 2025 and see where they're going to be heading into this new college football season. For starters, 5-7 on the year last year. Kentucky misses a bowl game in back-to-back seasons. For the first time since 2012-2013, Mark Stoops has been the guy there. At the beginning of last season, I thought he was going to get fired until I heard his buyout number. However, Kentucky was able to pull it all together, and after the loss to Louisville on December 1st, decided to fire Mark Stoops and head in a completely different direction. Now, why was that? Well, for starters, this offense was stagnant throughout the entire season. You see here, there's so many games where they couldn't even score over 28 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of the 12 games, they could not score 4 touchdowns in a game. They were 104th in the country in scoring, 106th in red zone efficiency. Stoops just could not pull this offensive together. And what's really held the glue for Kentucky over the last few seasons has been the defense. And the defense kind of fell apart. They were physical in the front seven. Guys like David Gusta played really well, in my opinion. They were 25th in yards per carry allowed. However, the pass game fell apart. 116th in pass yards allowed per game, 79th in scoring, and the real problem was they could not get to the quarterback. They were 40th in the country in sacks, which by SEC means you're basically close to last. This team could not get to the quarterback. It was a major problem. There were tons of games where they just got ran all over both ways, running and passing the football. And quite frankly, the last 2 blowout losses to Vanderbilt and Louisville were the nail in the coffin for the Stoops administration. It is now a new day, a new dawn in Kentucky. And let's talk about this new staff. Starting at head coach, former offensive coordinator at Oregon, has developed a ton of quarterback prospects, including Dante Moore, who is by far the Heisman favorite in my book. Will Stein, he is going to be the new head coach here. He was hired almost immediately after Stoops was fired. It seemed like this was kind of in the works, but offensive coordinator-wise, they bring in Joe Sloan. Now, Sloan has had a bad couple of years with LSU. They've underperformed offensively, but he was the quarterback's coach for Jaden Daniels when he won his Heisman. This guy loves a mobile quarterback, and I think they might have that. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Next up, defensive coordinator-wise, they bring in a guy in Jay Bateman, who was the defensive coordinator at Texas A&M. A lot of people ask, well, why in the world would a defensive coordinator make a kind of a step down move to go take a defensive coordinator job at a much lesser SEC school? Well, the answer to that is from Bateman himself, who said in his introductory press conference he wanted autonomy. At the beginning of this season, Mike Elko, the head coach of Texas A&M, decided to take over, or I guess retake over, play calling duties for the defense going into this season, and it kind of worked. Texas A&M had a top 25 defense, but I give a lot of that credit as well to Bateman himself. A&M, like I said, top 25 defense. They were number 1 in the country in sack percentage. Extremely impressive season, and in my opinion, a great hire for this Kentucky team who needs to transform defensively. Now that we've talked about the coaching staff, let's talk about how this is going to basically be a brand new roster going into this year, especially offensively. Let's talk about, though, the players that are departing from this program. For starters, I've got a bunch of different transfers. I believe there were 26 total transfers out, maybe even more than that. But for starters, we're going to look at quarterback 4-star transfer Cutter Boley. Last year, 2,100 pass yards, was the starter for the majority of the season. 21 touchdowns as well, but paired that with 15 interceptions. Very turnover-prone quarterback. He's going to Arizona State to compete for the starting job. Next up at running back, the dynamic duo of Dante Dowdle and Seth McGowan is no more. Now with Dowdle going to Georgia. He originally transferred from Nebraska. I thought it was to be the bell cow back, but definitely seemed that he took a back seat to McGowan last year. He had 560 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then last major transfer that I want to talk about right here is Gerard Smith, who goes to the cross-state rival of Louisville. Smith last year had 18 tackles, 5 tackles for loss. I thought he was going to be the next big-time defensive tackle at Kentucky. They've actually been producing NFL caliber defensive linemen, but Smith decides to take his talents to Louisville. A true betrayal of the Kentucky guard, but I don't blame him at all. When your coach gets fired, it's time to look for a new spot, especially if you don't receive a warm welcoming from the new staff coming in. Now, let's talk about the NFL caliber players that ended up going to the league. For starters, Jalen Farmer, a 12, I believe he had 24 starts. Yes, according to my notes, 24 starts for Kentucky over the last 2 years. A huge part of this Kentucky run game, which was fairly successful 2 years ago, but definitely struggled to say the least this past season. However, a major veteran presence as well as a lot of other players in this class. Joshua Braun, an offensive guard, 12 starts last year. Yeager Burton, 47 starts for this guy at Kentucky. Those are the major pieces missing on the interior part of this offensive line. And then last but not least, I want to talk about, there are a bunch of other players, like I've already mentioned, McGowan on this list. He goes to the NFL. Kendrick Law, David Gusta, already mentioned him briefly as well. But the player that I really want to discuss that I think is a major part of this Kentucky team over the last year or so, but didn't get drafted, didn't transfer it out, is J.Q. Hardaway, who ran out of eligibility. Last year, 40 solo tackles, 5 passes defended, a huge part of the secondary, who, like I said, didn't have a great year, but I thought Hardaway was a bit of a highlight in that group. Now let's move on to the returning production. For starters, we've got a tight end in Willie Rodriguez. Definitely started to come alive in the middle of the season. 23 receptions, 310 yards, just 1 touchdown. I do think he'll be a new established member of this offense because of his returning production and a lack thereof from the transfer portal. I think he'll get a lot of room to grow here, as well as Ty Bryant at safety, who comes from last year's starting crew. As you can see here, Kentucky did not make a lot of additions defensively, especially in the projected starting lineup according to our lads. I truly believe that we're going to see some of these rolled or bench players in the 2 deep here. I think that we're going to see some of these transfers become starters, but I'll get into that in just a little bit. Last player I want to talk about, you can see that they really honed in on the offensive line here, Will Stein and Joe Sloan, when attacking the transfer portal. But one guy that they did not get rid of, who had 5 starts last year and is a massive body, is Malachi Wood at right tackle, 6'8", 329 pounds. He's an absolute mammoth of a man. I think we're going to see some great things out of Wood going into, I believe, his redshirt junior year, if that's correct here on our lads. But now we move on to the transfers in, and we see there are a ton. I'm going to note quite a few of them, actually, but let's start with this offensive line. Lance Hurd, Tegris Chabola, I believe is how you pronounce it, Colton Price. Those are the 3 offensive linemen that I want to talk about. With Price, he's had 30 starts coming in from Baylor. He allowed just 1 sack in 526 pass attempts last season. Chabola comes from Ohio State. Now, he was not a premier offensive lineman at Ohio State, but won the national championship with the Buckeyes as the starter. He has 29 total starts. And then last but not least on this offensive line that I want to discuss is Lance Hurd, who, let me pull up my notes here, 24 starts at Tennessee, allowed just 3 sacks in 1,780 pass snaps over the last 2 seasons. I believe 1,700 snaps total. I apologize. But still, a very impressive resume from a Tennessee offense that loves to throw the rock around. This offensive line looks completely transformed, and I'm so excited to see how they reestablish the line of scrimmage offensively. But in the receiver group in the skill positions here, we're going to talk about Kenny Minchey, who is the backup quarterback for Notre Dame, kind of in a quarterback battle last year with CJ Carr, ended up losing that, but still a ton of talent, former 4-star, and to pair with him in the backfield, two dynamic players. CJ Baxter, who dealt with a lot of injuries last year at Texas, but in 2023 came onto the scene screaming, 800 total scrimmage yards, and then to pair with him, Javante Barnes, 700 scrimmage yards in 2024. Actually, I believe I have that mixed up. Javante Barnes had a really good 2024. CJ Baxter was actually the running back that was an absolute star from an injury-ridden running back room back in 2023, but has dealt with injuries and lost his position as the starter there at Texas over the last couple of seasons. Really looking forward to seeing him back in a two-deep role here with Kentucky. The last couple guys I want to talk about on this offense, Shane Carr, a Southern Utah transfer, looks to be kind of a burner. 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons at Southern Utah. But the guy that I really want to talk about is somebody that was a star at Oklahoma, transferred to LSU, did not get the role that he needed. I think some of that was contributed to by injury, but Nick Anderson, really looking forward to seeing what he has to offer this Kentucky offense. I believe he'll be the number 1 wide receiver for this skill group coming into next year. Now, Denarius Gray, true freshman, definitely heard some great things about him. Looking forward to seeing what kind of shine he can get. But this offense is completely different. Now, defensively, there were a lot of players that transferred out and as well went ahead and went to the NFL draft or graduated. But it seems projected by our lads that a lot of these role players from last year will be the starters. Defensively, though, there are a couple guys I wanted to talk about. Ahmad Bro, who comes from, I believe, LSU, a Louisiana native. He's played in 25 games as a defensive lineman. Would like to see him get into that starting rotation. Jamarian Harkless, 12 starts for Purdue last year, 2.5 sacks. He is going to be the nose tackle for this team. Now, Kentucky's defense matches, I think, a lot of what Texas A&M scheme-wise had to offer. So I think they're going to send a ton against the passer. And there is one guy that I want to talk about in rushing the passer. I believe it is going to be Elijah Barnes, I believe, who comes from Texas. Former 4-star, the edge rusher that could actually break through into the starting lineup, in my opinion, is Elijah Barnes. There are a bunch of other players on this team that I think are capable pass rushers. Sam Green as well. He hasn't had a ton of time as a starter. A Jack linebacker last year, 15 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. Looking forward to seeing what he has to offer, but there's a lot of new blood defensively that I'm excited to see. You could see some of the players of note here, but it looks like Kentucky's former bench players will be the starters this year. So going into this 2026 season, let's pull up the schedule and let's talk about the main storylines. I think number 1 is going to be the offensive line and the run game. Can it get fixed? Last year, you had 2 really good backs and I thought very capable interior offensive linemen, but for some reason, Kentucky could not put pen to paper and start running the football the way that they needed to. That's going to be storyline number 1. And then to pair with that, how does Will Stein make his mark here in year 1? This is a really tough schedule. We're looking at it together right now. I just don't know how many quote-unquote winnable games there are, especially now that there are 9 conference games to play in the SEC. Now, the defensive standouts are going to come from the transfers. That is storyline number 3 here. I want to see which transfers that ends up being. As of right now, there's not a lot of quote-unquote splashes on the defensive side of the football. A lot of developmental guys, former higher star recruits that fell down in the 2 deep of other big Power 4 schools. They're coming to Kentucky to seek redemption and start on a college football roster. Can they do that? And if they do, which ones will there be? And then last but not least in the storylines, Kenny Minchey. He did not win the quarterback battle last year versus CJ Carr. How will he perform becoming the starter here at Kentucky? I believe he was originally going to transfer to Nebraska, but now I think with Nebraska's shakeups, he ends up flipping his commitment to Kentucky and Will Stein. Really looking forward to seeing what that looks like. Now, the keys to improvement, I've already really hammered on it, but on both sides of the football, Kentucky has to control the line of scrimmage. Now, that's easier said than done, ladies and gentlemen, especially playing in the SEC. But especially offensively, this new offensive line should be able to make its mark. I really want to see Kentucky run the ball a lot more efficiently. And with C.J. Baxter and Javante Barnes in the backfield, they absolutely should be. Next, you've got to take care of the football. Now, this is a new regime, new quarterback, new running backs. The turnovers aren't translating from last year to this season, but it is still going to be unbelievably important to take care of the football. And that also can go for the defense. If you can create turnovers in some of these games at home, like LSU and Alabama, you make these games a lot easier. But going back to the line of scrimmage, I'm talking about sacking the quarterback. That is going to be a major key here. And like I said, who better to do that than Jay Bateman, who is coming from the #1 pass rushing team in Texas A&M over the last 2 seasons. So those are my keys to improvement. Now let's just go game by game and give a win-loss prediction. I've got a floor and a ceiling projection. Let's start with Youngstown State. Let's be honest, I know we can't call gimme games anymore because of the new slate of college football and what we're looking at here in terms of talent dispersion, but let's be honest, let's call it for what it is. This is a gimme game. Next up, true test for Will Stein out the gate. Alabama. I'm going to put this game on upset alert just because of Kentucky's history over the last few years as kind of a team that plays teams tough. They almost beat Georgia 2 seasons ago, 13-12, and then just last year lost a double overtime game to Texas. I think they could get the job done and beat Alabama outright, calling it upset, but I'm still going to ride with the Crimson Tide here. I think that this is going to be Kalen DeBoer's best roster. His guys are going to be a part of this core here. So we'll see what Alabama has in store for it in the 2026 seasons. Be sure to tune in for that video. But for now, I don't think Kentucky in just game 2 of the new regime is going to be able to compete with a win now Alabama. Then the going gets even tougher at Texas A&M. That is a painful way to have game 3 not in your house, but on the road. I'm going to be honest. Jay Bateman might be able to, scheme up a couple of good defensive possessions, but I do not expect this game to be competitive. I fully expect this entire team with Marcel Reed and Mario Craver returning this offense should be humming for Texas A&M. It's in College Station. I will give Texas A&M the benefit of the doubt here, especially at home. Then you return home to South Alabama. Now, while South Alabama might be a quote-unquote gimme game, beware, especially if this defense is not what it is supposed to be, which it very well could be. I do think this is an easier win for Kentucky. I have it as a confident win myself. But following that up at South Carolina, you just played the game last year. It was a blowout, and that was a very disappointing season for South Carolina, who once again are in win now mode. I think South Carolina, with the returning production on offense, especially with a guy like Lenore Sellers, is going to be a year 1 program in Kentucky at home. Another loss for the Wildcats. Now we have LSU at home, and we've talked about talent, right? Alabama, Texas A&M, even South Carolina. LSU is yet another one of those teams. I'm not even going to put this game on upset alert. It's kind of national championship or bust for Lane Kiffin down there in Baton Rouge. I believe that this LSU team is going to come in and just, quite frankly, stomp Kentucky. Now, could I be wrong? Absolutely. But that's my confident prediction. And then, of course, similar to the Alabama A&M game here, Oklahoma, the going gets tough on the road. This is a win-now SEC playoff caliber team. They just made it last year. They had gutsy wins last season during the regular season, especially at home. once again, expect this Oklahoma team to get the job done. Kentucky's going to fall short. Now, there is an upset game that I am calling right here, right now, based off of the production that's returning to Vanderbilt or lack thereof. Vanderbilt is not toting a top 10 roster in the SEC. They are a team that has historically struggled on the road in this conference. I think Kentucky can pounce on that, take some momentum back, and beat Vanderbilt. This game is on upset alert for me. But then you follow it up. A hard home game against an SEC opponent followed by a road one. And Tennessee, like a lot of these other teams, is trying to compete for a spot in the college football playoff. And they've been successful. Just 2 seasons ago, they made the college football playoffs. I expect them to be in similar contention this year. So yet another rivalry game for Kentucky here, but they fall short on the road. Then hosting Florida. Gutsy win last year, trying to stave Mark Stoops from being fired last season. A blowout victory against Florida. This is an upset alert game for me as well. However, I view it more as a 40-60 game. Florida has the 60% favor in my opinion. I'm going to give Kentucky a loss here, but absolutely would not be surprised if they pull off the upset here. Now we follow that up. There's a clear pattern here, folks, right? We've got a home SEC game followed by a road one. Missouri on the road. People are sleeping on this Missouri team. They're going to be extremely talented. The offense is going to be completely transformed. Bo Pribula missed a lot of time last year due to injury. I expect Missouri to bounce back this season under Drinkwitz. Let's see Missouri win that game. I would not be surprised if Kentucky was able to be competitive, but I would be surprised to see them outright win the game. I'll give them yet another loss. And then to close out the season versus Louisville, this is once again an upset alert game, but a 50-50 game in my opinion, and I give it to a staff that's already been established, a roster that has once again been transformed under the head coach there. Louisville is going to be a win now ACC team. I just can't say the same for Will Stein. Honestly, this is a coin flip game, and since it's at home, I might have to give the benefit of the doubt to Will Stein. As a matter of fact, I will. I'll call out an upset victory here for Kentucky. They end the season in style. They beat their in-state rival, and my prediction is 4-8 with wins over Youngstown State, South Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Louisville. Losses, of course, to all the other SEC teams that are extremely talented. The floor here is quite frankly 2-10. They could drop the game to Vanderbilt and Louisville. The floor is 7-5. Could you somehow turn out and beat Florida, Louisville, Vanderbilt, and somehow beat an Alabama or an LSU? Yes. But that is extremely unlikely in my opinion, especially in year one under this new regime. So I've got Kentucky going 4-8. Let me know what you think of that in the comments. Let me know other college football teams you'd like me to give a preview of. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.